Welcome to Surrender School. This is the science of Step 1. So let me just go through. This is the last time you'll ever have to hear my caveats for this workshop. I am not a medical doctor, scientist, or expert in the science of obesity and addiction. I am not saying in any way that my way is the right or best or only or true approach to abstinence and food plans. Always check with your doctor before doing anything different with your food plan. All right. So last session, we talked about the role sleep plays in obesity and food addiction, as well as epigenetics, that thing that turns genes on and off. And so we talked about epigenetics and obesity, and we discussed some of the possible strategies to use epigenetics to our best advantage. Are there any questions on the last session before I launch off into today's session? Today, I'm going to try and put all of this together. I'm going to talk about how the step 1 science informs all of the other steps for me. And I'm also going to share with you what I have learned in program over the past 6 years. Now, this is all just my opinion, okay? There's no scientific backing for anything I'm going to say today. This is just my opinion, my experience, strength, and hope. So take it for what it's worth. Take what you like, leave the rest. Okay. So I have just spent the past 6 weeks sharing with you how the science of our disease informs how I took step 1, how I work step 1. Now, let me tell you how the science affects the way I work all of the other steps, because it does. It has impacted all of the other steps for me. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. For me, my higher power doesn't change the reality or the science of how my brain and body work. What my higher power does do, and this is something I cannot do on my own, is help me navigate the science. Then I am restored to the sanity of understanding that I am part of nature and I cannot make my body and brain other than the way they are. My sanity involves aligning myself with these laws of nature and the way that I was born. My insanity comes from trying to fight that. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. I stop trying to play God with my brain and body. That's my decision here. The decision I made was to stop playing God. And one of the biggest ways that I played God was trying to make myself not have this disease, make myself eat like a normal person. That was me, one of the many ways that I tried to play God. But that's the way the science informs step 2 for me here. Step 3 for me here. I stop trying to play God with my brain and body, and instead, I rely on my higher power 100% for the guidance on how to best live within the strengths and limitations of the body and brain I have. I don't ask my higher power to change my reality, change the reality of my disease. I just ask how to best navigate it. I no longer interpret emotional and physical discomfort as a sign that something is necessarily wrong, because that's not always true. The science taught me that in getting abstinent, staying abstinent, following a food plan, losing the weight. There was all kinds of emotional and physical discomfort there, and there was nothing wrong. It was just my body doing its thing and my disease fighting really hard to keep me inactive in my disease. So I just recognized this discomfort as part of the process. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now, this was an objective look at the causes and conditions of the drivers of my disease. And really, it's the drivers of the mental obsession part of my disease. Some of it was the physical allergy, but most of the causes and conditions that I uncovered in my 4-step had to do with my mental obsession. It showed me how demanding that my brain and body be able to eat one cookie and stop has caused me and those I love untold amounts of grief and despair. Trying to control my brain and body, everyone and everything in my life was the main driver of the disease for me. It was pouring gasoline on the mental obsession of my disease. It wasn't about how awful I was or what an awful person I was or how horrible I had behaved. All it was about was showing me how demanding that I could eat one cookie and stop made me insane, and worse, made me act insane, and even worse yet, made me hurt people in my insanity. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This step helped me see my humanity. We all do this stuff. All of the causes and conditions that I uncovered in my 4-step are probably pretty darn similar to the stuff that you have or are going to uncover in your 4-step. We all do this stuff. We all fight against the reality of our disease and reality, period. We all try to control others and the world around us. For me, because of my addiction and the way my brain and body work, the consequences of this fight against reality guaranteed my destruction. So it was really nice giving away my 4-step in my 5th-step to a sponsor who just kept nodding her head because she had done all the crazy crap I had, because we all do it. So it was, I mean, it sucked the shame right out of the causes and conditions for me because everybody else has done it too. I am not uniquely awful in any way. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 6 helped me get really clear on how unwilling I had been to accept the truth of how my body and brain work in this disease. And it helped me get really clear about how I had been unwilling to feel the emotional and physical discomfort that abstinence and following a food plan brought up for me. It brings that up for people with our disease. It just does, because that's what we're trying to medicate away from, is any of that kind of discomfort. So it really got me to see how unwilling I had been to feel hungry, to feel that crazy starvation response stuff, how unwilling I had been to accept life on life's terms, to accept people as they are. It really got me to get very clear on how my defects of character were all about trying to preserve my ability to be active in my disease, trying to control my world so I could continue to self-medicate and be numb. Because that was the biggest payoff for me in my disease. It was just being numb, escaping, and oblivion. Those were my big three. Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. The science showed me what I actually needed to humbly ask my higher power for. I used to ask that I could eat one cookie and stop, that I could binge at Thanksgiving like everyone else and stop. I was asking for the ability to control my disease. And as long as I was asking for that, I was going to fail. It was humbly asked my higher power to help me remove all of those causes and conditions that I uncovered in step 4. I didn't ask that my disease be magically erased or that I somehow be given the willpower of a saint. I am now constantly asking my higher power for guidance every day on how to better align with the reality, the science of how my brain and body work, and how to better align and navigate my reality, period. That's just day-to-day living. I ask that every day, multiple times a day. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. The way the step 1 science affects this step for me is that I have honestly looked at the ways I have harmed my body and psyche by refusing to accept the truth about how they truly work in this disease. And I know it's not about making amends to ourselves, and I know all of that, but I had a lot of amends to make to my body. My body was the recipient. My body and spirit were the recipients of most of the damage of my acting out in my disease. In order to become willing to make amends, I had to forgive my brain and body for how they work. I had to forgive them for having this disease. And I had to forgive myself for trying to force them, my brain and my body, to be something other than they were. I had to forgive them for having this disease so I could truly make amends to them. Because as long as I was secretly harboring that resentment that I couldn't eat one piece of cheesecake and stop like everybody else I knew, there was no way I could make amends. I was just going to continue to torture my body by demanding it do things that it can't do. So that's how step 8 worked for me with the science. Step 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Working and living within the science of my addiction is my living amends to my body and my brain. My abstinence and my food plan are my living amends to my body and my brain. All day, every day. I give my brain and body what it needs. Working this program is my living amends to my brain, my mind, my spirit. Working on emotional sobriety is the way that I work an amends to my mental obsession. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I work really hard at being aware of when I fall back into trying to control my disease, trying to force my body and brain to handle things they can't. Things like, oh, well, I'm just going to wing it on the cruise. Or, well, I'm gonna go to this dinner party and eat whatever they give me because, it's a special dinner party for my birthday and they worked really hard on it. Oh, and expecting myself to do that, that's trying to be in control of my disease, and it never has worked for me. I cannot control my disease. I also, with my steps 10s, I also keep on the lookout for when I try to blame others or make others responsible for my disease. Well, I can't get abstinent because he keeps bringing home treats for me. Or I can't get abstinent because, my best friends are foodies. And, if I want to socialize with them, I have to go out to these restaurants. Making everyone else and everything else responsible for what I put in my mouth is a recipe for disaster. And that is something that I always keep an eye out for with my step 10s. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. I am always listening for my higher power's guidance on step 1, because step 1, I know a lot of people think that you take step 1 and it's a one and done and you move on. And I take step 1. I practice step 1 multiple times every day. I certainly practice step 1 every time I sit down to a meal. I practice step 1 every time I do meal prep. I practice step 1 every time I make a grocery list or I shop for food. I am always practicing step 1. My higher power and the reality of how my body and brain work are the spiritual anchors for everything I do. My deep understanding and acceptance of my powerlessness is my touchstone every day. I meet my higher power in my powerlessness, in the moment of my powerlessness, in every moment of every day. That powerlessness will never go away. And that is where I meet my higher power every day, because I desperately need my higher power's help in those moments. Okay, step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to compulsive overeaters and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. The science of step 1 was an important spiritual awakening for me, and I've talked a little bit about this. I am carrying this message to you right now, and I am trying to practice living in alignment with reality in all of my affairs. I practice accepting life on life's terms to the best of my ability every day. And I will tell you, when they talk about in the big book, expanding your spiritual life and that people will relapse if they rest on their laurels and not expand their spiritual life, I will tell you that my spiritual awakening just grows and grows and grows because of these spiritual experiences, these perceptual shifts, these changes in the way that I think about things and approach things and see things and interpret things. All of those are spiritual experiences for me, and they grow my spiritual awakening on a daily basis. And if I ever think I'm done growing and learning, I'm dead meat for a relapse, because I'll stop doing what I need to do to continue my growth and my learning. And I don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to do that. Are there any questions? So now I'm just going to talk about more in general what I have learned over the 6 years of going through all of this. My my year after year, my year of weight loss that resulted in a relapse where I gained everything back. And then the next year that I lost it all again and then proceeded to gain it all back. And then how I approached everything differently came in and got recovery. So here's kind of what I've learned over the past 6 years. Some of it may resonate with you, some of it may not. I have spent most of my life trying to do perfectly what my disease makes it impossible for me to do at all. Things like eat in moderation, eat spontaneously, eat for recreation, eat for entertainment, eat for celebration, thinking that I can make exceptions to my abstinence, thinking I can fix what my body and brain do when I am abstinent, when I am following a food plan, being able to cure my body of this disease. Never going to happen. Never. I mean, not only am I not going to do it perfectly, I'm not going to be able to do even a crappy job of it because it's impossible to do. I finally recognize that, accept it, and live it every day. I have had to stop demanding perfection from myself because it makes me afraid to make mistakes, which then leads me or prevents me from being able to learn from my mistakes. And then worst of all, I let my mistakes give me permission to unleash my binging because after all, I had blown it for the day anyway. I'd had too many green beans anyway. So that black and white thinking, that perfectionistic thinking doomed me to relapse after relapse after relapse after relapse, and doomed me to despair and depression and the belief that I could never recover. So I had to let that go. And one of the things that I've really figured out over this 6 years is that when I do make a mistake with my food, there is always something to learn from it. I can, if I go to my higher power, maybe go to some fellows, walk it through, talk it through, instead of being ashamed and hiding it and not letting anyone know, for fear of being fired by my sponsor and whatnot, I bring it out in the light so I can learn from it. My higher power can help me learn from it. I guess I can't have that food. I guess that food needs to be maybe moved to the yellow light or maybe even the red light category for me. Or maybe I have to prepare differently for this kind of food event. Or maybe I have to pack my own protein when I go on trips because I can't be assured of getting what I need. So I want to be able to learn and grow from my mistakes. I don't want to be ashamed anymore. That's not what mistakes are for. And perfectionism led me to believe that mistakes were to be hidden, were to be lied about, were to be ashamed of. And I don't want to live like that anymore because that only guarantees me a relapse. There is not a way that I have found in the 6 years of really working this to get and stay abstinent painlessly. And I know I have said this many times in this workshop, but I want to say it one more time because I find that people truck along, they figure out what their red light foods are, they figure out what their abstinence food-wise and behavior-wise is going to be. They pick a food plan, they start following the food plan, and then when they hit up against feelings that come up that they can't medicate, any of the biological or biochemical starvation response stuff, or any of that crappy stuff that happens in our bodies when we're beginning this process, they believe or they interpret it as something is wrong, something is bad, and I have to get away from this. And the only way to get away from it that we have ever known is food, and they relapse back into the food. And they give in to the demand that they not feel uncomfortable. And getting through that, working through that discomfort, that's what our higher power's for. That's what this program is for. That's what the steps are for. That's what this fellowship and your fellows are for. That's what all of this is for, is helping us do that, work through that. And it gets, I promise you people, it gets less over time. It really does. And all of a sudden you start being really able to feel the joy, feel the excitement, feel the contentment, feel the satisfaction. It's amazing to me, but I had to first be able to get through some of the discomfort. Okay, I think I've beat that horse to death. I'll let that one go. Okay. So what is abstinence really? Okay. I think we've talked about that a lot during this workshop. OA has its own definition. FA has its own definition. Gray Sheeters has their own definition of abstinence. I think CEA Howe has their own definition of abstinence. All of those have their own definition of food plan as well as part of abstinence. And OA doesn't give you a food plan, but they definitely have a definition of abstinence. But what is it really? My science journey taught me that abstinence really, at its core, is absolute surrender to the reality that I have this disease, this addiction, and that I cannot and never will be able to eat like other people, like normal people. I must surrender to my deepest core that I am truly, truly, really, scientifically, bodily and mentally different from my fellows. Not worse, just different. And I have to do things differently in order to take proper care of myself, or I suffer. And I suffer greatly. And I know all of you know what I mean by suffer. Abstinence is very simple for me. It is just refraining from eating my alcoholic foods. My food plan is just a tool I use to lose and maintain my weight. And my food plan is often where most of the mistakes are made and where most of the learning and growth take place. So just because I screwed up on my food plan doesn't mean I've blown it all and I might as well go eat. I had to take that option away from myself. The science has taught me that I can't take a day off from what I need to do. I cannot make an exception, no matter what is going on in my life or anyone else's. Alcoholics and drug addicts never take a day off. They never think they can take a drink or a drug and get away with it. They never think it's appropriate to make an exception. It is no more appropriate for you to have a piece of wedding cake at your daughter's wedding than it is for an alcoholic to drink a glass of champagne in a toast to their daughter at their wedding. It is the same. And if you believe that it is different and that you can get away with an exception, you're saying that our disease, our addiction is not as serious as other addictions. And that, my friends, is a lie. I believe it's called being in denial, or at least it was for me, because as long as I operated under that delusion, I remained in relapse for 20 plus years. I could not get or stay abstinent. The science also taught me that I can't just focus on my body. I can't just focus on the physical allergy. And that is what we're doing when all we're focusing on is the magical food plan, or the magical this, or the magical that, or the magical supplement that's somehow going to make abstinence easier. When all we're concerned about is our food plan and jumping on the scale, then that means all we're focused on is the physical allergy. And that's only half of the disease. It's important, don't get me wrong. We can't have recovery without it. But it's only half of the story. And quite frankly, I think for any kind of long-term recovery, it's the the least important half. The mental obsession is much more important for staying in long-term recovery. At least that has been true for me. My spiritual awakening started, oops, I'm sorry, got ahead of myself. The whole point, the entire point of the 12-step program is to elicit a spiritual awakening. It is not to find the magical food plan. I know that's hard to believe, but the whole point of the 12 steps is to have a spiritual awakening that will solve your problem. This is where I have had to concentrate most of my work in this program. This is what truly helps me with the mental obsession, is my spiritual growth, my spiritual connection to my higher power. My spiritual awakening started when I began reading spiritual literature that really spoke to me, whatever that is for you. It made me question, this spiritual literature I was reading made me question all of my beliefs, all of my perceptions and actions involving my disease. Then it led me to question all of these things around how I had been living my life, period. Question everything. It all came down for me to what Rami Shapiro calls an addiction to control. My bottom line was that I did not feel safe in this world. And my addiction to control was my way of trying to feel safe. My addiction to food was just my solution to how bad I felt because I could not control what I thought I needed to control in order to be safe. Things like what others said, what others did, what other people thought, particularly about me, how other people felt, what other people believed. Maybe your addiction to control is based on maybe not feeling loved, or maybe not feeling accepted, or maybe not feeling like you belong. Maybe your addiction to control is based on not being good enough. Whatever it is, the spiritual work in this program can help you with it. Not by changing your past, not by changing how other people behave, not by changing your outside reality, but by changing you. That's how this program works. My spiritual experiences in program are primarily shifts in perception, and I've talked about that a few times with you guys. Shifts in perception, the way that I see and understand things. I have had a few mountaintop experiences in my life, where the clouds part, the sun shines through, the angelic choir is going. I've had a few of those in my life, and they are fabulous. But the much more enduring, long-lasting, transformational spiritual experiences I have been these shifts in perception, where my higher power helps me see something differently. Those have been the most powerful experiences for me. The biggest perceptual shift I have had, the granddaddy of them all, had to do with my eating and my weight and the realization that there was a scientific explanation for my disease and that it was not my fault. It was nothing I did or didn't do. It was just the way I was made, plain and simple. My body and brain were doing exactly what they were made to do. This beginning granddaddy perceptual shift led me to further explore the science. This helped me to explain to myself when I felt a terrible urge to binge. Okay, so this is just because my brain isn't seeing my leptin. It's not because I'm a loser or a failure or that I didn't truly take step one. It wasn't any of those things. It taught me how to support my body and brain, how to navigate my physical reality, not how to control it or change it. Then, after that, it led to another perceptual shift. And I believe, to me, that this really has everything to do with my mental obsession. I began to see how acceptance of other realities, people, places, things, and situations, were crucial to my continued recovery, to the recovery of my mental obsession. Trying to control and change my physical reality always led me back to the food, right? Trying to control and change the reality of my world, period, also always led me back to the food. I had to learn, with the help of program and my higher power, to surrender to and accept all reality. It didn't mean I had to like it, and it didn't mean I had to condone it, but I first had to accept it as being real and act accordingly, as being real and out of my control. I can try to influence people, places, and things. I can try and do my best to be a positive force for good in this world, but I know full well that the outcome is out of my control. It was such a freaking relief to stop fighting, to stop demanding that everything and everyone be the way I want them to be. And I want to give a specific or a more specific example around this. My whole thing is safety. I was talking about that a few minutes ago. My addiction to control is all around safety, being safe. So one of the main ways that operated in my life before I really started working a spiritual program was that I tried to prevent the crisis. I tried to prevent the bad thing that I just knew was going to happen because so-and-so was acting like this or doing that or talking like this. And I would try and control that person to try and prevent the crisis. And I felt very virtuous doing it because after all, I was helping them. that little dance, that little controlled dance, I don't know if any of you grew up in the 80s, but the safety dance, that song goes off in my head when I catch myself trying to do that kind of stuff with my 10th steps. When I'm trying to prevent the crisis, trying to fix so the crisis doesn't happen, I'm doomed. I'm doomed. The disease, that's a little crack that my disease can get into and wiggle its way into and explode on my mind and my spirit. And so I really look out for that. But trying to prevent the crisis is just another way that I want my way. And I selfishly want everything to go my way. And I will engage in self-seeking behaviors in order to do that, including lying. So that was really important when my higher power let me in on that one, on that particular pattern of behavior. It was very humbling in one of the best ways ever for me, for my program. And last but not least, I have learned over the past 6 years how absolutely critical it is to have a higher power that you really believe in and that you really can trust and that you really can go to with 100% of absolutely everything. Once I found this concept for myself, everything else just fell into place. All the gears fit. And everything, life does not go smoothly. Life is always lifey, but my ability to manage it got so much better when I was able to find that concept of a higher power. Are there any questions on this section?
Actually, Linda, there is a question, and the question is, how do you deal with fellows like sponsees or friends, whatever, who keep going off plan and then feel angry at themselves and full of shame?
All I can do in that instance is share my experience, strength, and hope, and how doing that hamster wheel guaranteed my continued relapse and guaranteed that I wouldn't be able to get into recovery. The shame part is, after a while, I'm going to say this, and I don't mean to be harsh, but after a while, that shame can be a perfect excuse to continue eating. You can let it be the most comfortable fur-lined pity pot that allows you to continue to engage in your disease. And all I can do is give them my experience, strength, and hope on my journey and unconditionally love them. Just love them for who they are and let them be who they are, while still giving your experience, strength, and hope. And perhaps you'll plant seeds for later on in their journey, perhaps not. But I don't want to make, because I know it can be tiresome sometimes. Watching people, listening to people on that hamster wheel of abstinence, relapse, abstinence, relapse, abstinence, relapse. It can be very tiring. And so I see that and I treat that as a spiritual practice as part of my program, to be loving and not to judge, because God knows I stayed in that place for 20 plus years. And I can't imagine how sick and tired people got to listening to me, but no one was unkind, and it allowed me to keep coming back. So that's the way I view that. All right, I just want to wrap it up today with just a few thoughts. To me, this program has been an amazing, beautiful adventure. I used to think of it as a punishment. For a long time, I thought of it as a punishment. because I was so stupid and I was so fat and I was so ugly and I was just so weak-willed and everything else that I had to come into these rooms because, I couldn't do it like everyone else was doing it. I don't see it like that at all anymore. Now I see it as an incredible adventure that I am privileged to go on. And I understand when people say, I am a grateful recovering compulsive overeater or a grateful recovering food addict. Because if I didn't have this, I will tell you right now, I would not do the work that it has required of me to be in recovery. I would not have done the spiritual work. I would not have done the emotional, psychological work that it has required of me. I mean, that whole line in the big book about, this meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. They ain't lying. That is probably one of the greatest understatements of the big book. The work I had to do in order to get into recovery was a lot. I don't know if everybody else has to do this amount of work. I have no idea. All I know is that it's what I had to do. I am always growing and always learning. I draw from everywhere and everyone to enrich my program and my life, whether it's 12-step based or not. My life fits into my program. Everything I look at is through a 12-step lens. I will admit that. When I read something, when I read a book, when I listen to someone, it's through a 12-step lens. There's always something I can learn and grow from when I look at things that way. My program is enriched daily because I choose to look at things that way. I'm doing experiments all the time to figure out what works for me and what doesn't. Some of them are spectacular failures. Some of them are just funny failures, and some of them actually work. And then I add them to my program and I move on and I grow from it. So I will say that it has been an amazing journey and continues to be an amazing journey for me. I remember a friend of mine with really, really long-term abstinence and recovery in this program. He said to me, I was saying, how amazing I was feeling after like a year of abstinence and being in recovery. And he said, oh, wait till you've got 2 years. Wait till you've got 4 years. Wait till you've got 10 years. Wait till you've got 20 years. And what he was saying to me there is there's always more. There's always more to grow. There's always more to learn. There's always more beauty in this adventure. And I believe him. I absolutely believe him. Now, with that being said, please feel free to ignore everything I've said in this workshop. If it doesn't resonate for you, if it doesn't work for you, then it's not useful for you. Drop it and go figure out what does work for you. Maybe there's another flavor of food recovery that would work for you. Do it. Do whatever works for you. There is no one true, universally true way. That's just not been my experience. And last but not least, nobody can give you recovery. You have to work for it. You have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to try new things. You have to be willing to grow and learn. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable sometimes. You have to be willing to be humble enough to be teachable constantly in this program. There are no magical sponsors. There are no magical food plans. And I will tell you, there are no magical food recovery groups because I have been in them all. It doesn't even matter what food group you're in. As long as you're working a program, you can do this. Anyone can recover. I don't care how long you've been in program without recovering. You still can do it. I guarantee it. It is open to everyone. If I can do it, you can do it. I guarantee it. And I want to say one last thing, and then I'm done for today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share this stuff with you. This has been an amazing process for me. And I have learned so much in putting this stuff together for you. And it has been my absolute utmost pleasure and privilege to share it with you. So thank you for showing up, because I couldn't do it if you didn't show up. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for recovering with Surrender School.